So I thought I would take this opportunity to revisit morale in war games and chaos in war. And the occasion for the reconsideration includes these two things. One, I'm now thinking that given my concerns about the portrayal of morale in war games, now I'm seriously wondering whether my concerns are not in part the result of the fact that I have been playing the wrong war games, so to speak. But maybe I should take more time to find the war games out there that portray morale in the way that I think it should be. So I'll talk about that. I can talk about that. And as for chaos and war, I do have a strong reaction to this idea and this phrase, popular phrase, war is chaos. But I have some clarifications and some refinements there, having to do with uncertainty versus chaos. So I had actually committed to video a critique of morale in war games. And actually, the very next day, I was reading a set of wargaming rules, and the author of these rules quite explicitly explains his approach to modeling morale in the war game, and it was in part spot on for me, and I instantly knew it would be proper to revisit this. Okay, so back to my concerns about morale in war games, and most significantly and upfront, the modeling of morale in war games in general is pretty poor. And I've talked, poor modeling in war games leads ultimately to confused ideas about war. And confused ideas about war is really not good. Basically, war is too serious to have to allow the proliferation of too many inaccuracies. So these are the concerns. One, and I've seen this in design and rule set after rule set, this problem is along the lines of the designer is explicit and says, in this game, morale is, a measurement of X, Y, and Z, or in this game, morale is used to represent X, Y, and Z. It's good that this is made explicit, but it is not uncommon for one of those, or for one or more of those elements that is being rolled up under the term morale, to not be morale at all. And that can lead to some interesting results, to say the least. When you take something that isn't morale at all and roll it under that concept, and then try to model morale accurately, it gets confused, to say the least. And then there's the problem of morale being portrayed in war games as something that is like a yo-yo. It's something. Morale is portrayed as something that is just flipping and flinging all over the place, shooting up, plummeting, over a short amount of time. Same units involved. It's like, I'll call this the morale is neurosis problem. Say the least. Don't like that. Don't like to see that. And third, the general problem is correctly capturing some elements of morale, but correctly capturing those for one level of war and applying that directly to an entirely different level of war without any adjustment, any adjustment or accommodation at all. So these are the concerns. And again, bottom line is poor modeling of morale leads to troubling ideas about war. I find myself going down the path again of relooking my concerns about morale modeling in war games, but that wasn't the point of this relook. So I'll jump ahead. I can always talk about morale again another time. It's most interesting to get to this fantastic timing. Again, one day after I recorded on video morale in war games and troubles I see. Very next day, right there in a rule set, black and white, very clear, unmistakable, which is good. Unmistakable. The rules designer starts off the morale section, the rules, with morale is a unit quality. Now, I'm paraphrasing here because paraphrasing should be good enough. It's the general idea here, but it starts off something very close to, if not exactly, morale is a unit quality, period. And it's like, wow, finally, finally, the wording I can relate to. Yes, exactly. Morale is a unit quality. Exactly. And so what flows from that in the design is, by and large, for me, very, very agreeable. Very. Now, unfortunately, right after that accurate statement, still, the designer brings in the concept of morale states. So the designer is distinguishing morale as a unit quality and morale states, which, by the way, should work. I mean, there shouldn't be a problem here. And yet, to my mind, there still is a problem. And this is why. So the designer says morale is a unit quality, correct? And then says essentially, but there are also these morale states. And then, again, what is very good is the designer explains quickly, gives a thumbnail sketch of each of these different morale states. And so which again, it's an approach. But what I find interesting is that when you look inside the definitions of each of these morale states, you can get an idea of the constituent factors. So when you look in the definitions of the morale states, you can see something about organization or cohesion, if you want to use that word. You can pull out something like determination. So there are at least two, something like organization, cohesion, and something like determination, will, whatever you want to call that, enthusiasm, motivation, whatever you want to call that. So my idea is that, yes, you have morale, which should be treated as essentially a unit quality, and then have morale states that represent, again, a conglomeration of things that, well, I'll just at least say that I would find it interesting to pull out those things that are being lumped under morale states and ditch the morale states idea. This is a minor point, okay? I think that the designer starts off on the right foot, which is most important. Morale is a unit quality. Now, it's funny, this idea of morale as a unit quality, and the idea that wargamers would actually accept this concept. Now, here, I'll just paint the picture of more or less a generic a generic squad level World War II small unit combat action game where units are, again, they're wavering, they're breaking, they're routing, they're rallying, and who knows what else. I just find it funny that wargamers will accept all of the die rolling, die roll modifiers, frankly, the unpredictability of that for what is called morale, and yet, this is just funny. I find it hilarious. And yet those same gamers will scoff at having to roll for movement ability, movement allowance. It's like, wait a minute. You'll accept all the rules, mechanics, and everything else for morale, which is a unit quality, and yet it's out of the question that you should have to roll or any other mechanism. Basically, well, not basically, a related idea is it's unacceptable that movement capability should in any way be variable. It's kind of funny. But yes, morale is a unit quality. It is functionally, it has a lot in common with, proficiency, movement allowance, and things like that. But yeah, I just wanted to elaborate because I have talked about my concerns about morale in war games. This very refreshing read of this rule set where the designer stated exactly what I was looking for. Morale is a unit quality. And then what flows from that. Now, that's where I'm interested in what designers do with that idea, that morale is a unit quality. It's not this, again, this mercurial thing that some games make it into. Okay. I guess the whole point with that, with all of that about my concerns about morale in war games, is that maybe I should just accept that I started with the wrong war games, because some war games apparently are getting a lot of this right. Okay. Chaos in war games. Basically, I wanted to just revisit this to provide some refinements. I have talked about Clausewitz, what he says about intelligence, uncertainty, and chaos, which and all of this is by recollection. Goes to this idea of war is chaos, which is an idea that I fairly reject. So, to revisit, first of all, Clausewitz doesn't talk, as I recall, doesn't talk about chaos in war hardly at all, if at all. Chaos is not a major theme for Clausewitz. Now, uncertainty is, and it is, bottom line is, for Clausewitz, war is fundamentally about uncertainty, or uncertainty is at the very core of war, but that's not the only thing at the core of war. But yes, uncertainty permeates the nature of war. Clausewitz accepted that. However, and here's kind of the fine point and the refinement here for me, uncertainty is not chaos. Chaos is not uncertainty. So we don't want to slide from uncertainty over into chaos like they're the same. They're not. Uncertainty is what Clausewitz talks a lot about, and uncertainty with respect to the fog of war, yes. Capturing that in war games, yes. Chaos is utter and complete disorder and confusion. And that's what I said simply doesn't that doesn't hold. That does not hold. Does not hold any weight. That idea doesn't hold any weight. That would go back to where I started with, if war is so, I don't know, unfathomable, it would not be the human activity it is, to say the least. So the refinement about uncertainty, chaos is out. Chaos is well, actually, before I talked about where possibly that came from, but that's just out. Uncertainty, yes. Okay, so the refinement on my part is, yes, Clausewitz talks about uncertainty permeating war. It's not the same thing as chaos. And as a matter of fact, he goes to lengths to talk about this uncertainty. This uncertainty is not some type of, again, insurmountable existential uncertainty. Actually, he's quite clear about how this uncertainty is managed, dealt with, and even surmounted. Well, surmounted in a sense. And so the idea that, so two final remarks, then I'm done for now. So while uncertainty is there, and so while you might say the commander is surrounded or enveloped in uncertainty, it's not the same thing as saying the commander doesn't know anything. Again, making the jump from uncertainty to not knowing anything is not sustainable. And finally, and very, very, very importantly, uncertainty and other aspects of the nature of war can appear very different at different levels of war. So there can be higher or lower levels of uncertainty at the strategic level. There can be higher or lower levels of uncertainty at the operational level and all the way down to the tactical level. This doesn't really mean anything for the nature of war, because that is a part of the nature of war. And that's just the way it is. So it's not automatic that if a war game is going to portray some level of war, that there should be some type of accepted level of uncertainty. Okay, I think that's enough for now.